Olivia, please, just this once. Can't you think about someone other than yourself? The words hit me like ice water, but what froze my blood wasn't the accusation. It was the familiar scene playing out in front of me. My younger sister, Emma, lay in her hospital bed, pale and fragile, her green eyes filled with tears that I now knew were crocodile tears. My fiancé, Daniel, stood beside her, his hand gently stroking her hair with a tenderness he'd never shown me. Emma needs this more than you do, he continued, not even looking at me. The engagement, the wedding, it would give her hope, something to live for during her treatment. I stood, frozen, in the doorway, my designer handbag slipping from numb fingers. Because I'd been here before. I'd lived this exact moment, heard these exact words, felt this exact betrayal 3 months ago. 3 months before I died. I don't understand, I whispered, though I understood perfectly. The date on my phone confirmed it. March 15th, the day my life had first begun to unravel. Emma's voice was barely a whisper, so weak and innocent. I know it's selfish, Olivia, but I've always dreamed of a beautiful wedding. And with the cancer, the doctors say I might not have much time left. She squeezed Daniel's hand. Danny's been so kind, visiting me every day while you're at work. He understands what I'm going through. Daniel finally looked at me, his brown eyes cold with a righteousness that made me sick. She's your sister, Olivia, your only family. How can you be so heartless? Heartless. The same word he'd used before. The same word that had broken me the first time, making me believe I was a monster for wanting to keep my own fiancé. But now I knew the truth. Now I knew that Emma's terminal cancer was a lie, that her treatment was elaborate theatre, that my devoted fiancé had been planning to steal my family's pharmaceutical fortune all along. I had been such a fool. When did you start feeling this way about my sister Daniel? My voice was steadier than I expected. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. It's not like that. Seeing her suffer made me realise what really matters. Love isn't about big weddings and expensive rings. It's about sacrifice. Sacrifice. I repeated the word slowly, tasting its bitterness. You want me to sacrifice my engagement so you can marry my dying sister? It would only be temporary, Emma said quickly, just until the end. Then you and Danny could... No, the word cut through the room like a blade. Both of them stared at me in shock. Excuse me? Daniel's eyebrows shot up. I picked up my handbag, slinging it over my shoulder with deliberate calm. I said no, I won't give you my engagement ring. I won't cancel our wedding, and I won't participate in this touching display of sibling sacrifice. Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears. Olivia, how can you be so cruel? I'm dying. Are you? I tilted my head, studying her face. Dr. Morrison seemed quite optimistic about your prognosis when I spoke to him last week. The flash of panic in Emma's eyes confirmed what I already knew. In my first life, I had been too trusting, too guilt-ridden to question her medical claims. But death had a way of clearing one's vision. Daniel stepped protectively in front of Emma's bed. Your sister is fighting for her life, and you're worried about a piece of jewellery. I laughed, the sound harsh in the sterile hospital room. This piece of jewellery represents a promise, Daniel. A promise you made to me, but I suppose promises don't mean much when there's a larger fortune at stake. What are you talking about? The inheritance from our father. The pharmaceutical company's shares that will transfer to Emma when she, tragically, passes away from her illness. Very convenient that her devoted husband would then control everything. The colour drained from Daniel's face. Emma struggled to sit up in her bed, no longer looking quite so frail. Olivia, that's a horrible thing to say. Emma's voice had more strength now, her performance slipping. How dare you suggest that Daniel would what? pretend to love a dying woman to steal her family's company, would fake compassion to manipulate her sister into giving up everything. I stepped closer to the bed. Tell me, Emma, when exactly did Dr. Morrison diagnose your cancer? Because I've seen your medical records. The lie hit its target. Emma's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You had no right to... I had every right. You're my sister, and I was worried sick about you. Imagine my surprise when I discovered your terminal diagnosis doesn't exist anywhere in your actual medical history. Daniel's face had gone from pale to red. Even if there's been some misunderstanding about the diagnosis. Misunderstanding? My voice rose. The misunderstanding is thinking I'm still the naive little girl who would believe anything to make everyone else happy. I turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Daniel, that promotion you're expecting at the law firm, the one handling father's estate, you might want to reconsider your career prospects. As I walked away, I heard Emma calling after me, her voice no longer weak but sharp with panic. Olivia, wait, you don't understand. We can explain. But I was already gone, my heels clicking down the hospital corridor with purpose. I had a new life to build, and this time I wouldn't be anyone's victim. The elevator doors closed behind me, and I caught my reflection in the polished steel. 25 years old, with auburn hair and my father's determined blue eyes. In my first life, I had died at 28, betrayed and broken. This time would be different. This time, I would be the one writing the ending. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jessica. Coffee later? I have news about that billionaire investor you met at the charity gala. I smiled, remembering. Alexander Knight, mysterious, powerful, and, according to Jessica's research, completely legitimate in his business dealings. In my first life, I had been too devoted to Daniel to pay attention to other men. But Alexander had lingered in my memory, his dark eyes and quiet confidence. Intriguing even then. I typed back, yes, I have some news too. As the elevator reached the ground floor, I felt something I hadn't experienced in my first life. Anticipation. Emma and Daniel thought they were so clever, so calculated in their manipulation of Dean. They had no idea they were playing against someone who already knew all their moves. The automatic doors of the hospital slid open, and I stepped into the afternoon sunlight. Somewhere across the city, Alexander Knight was probably reviewing investment portfolios in his glass office tower. He had no idea that his life was about to intersect with mine in ways that would benefit us both immensely. My phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call and blocked his number. Then I did the same with Emma's. Let them panic. Let them scramble to adjust their plans. This time, I was the one holding all the cards. The coffee shop buzzed with afternoon energy, but Jessica's whispered words cut through the noise like a knife. Alexander Knight isn't just wealthy, Olivia. He's terrifyingly wealthy. We're talking about a man who could buy entire countries if he felt like it. Jessica leaned forward, her laptop screen glowing between us. And, according to my contacts at the financial district, he's been asking about you. My heart skipped. Asking about me? Ever since the charity gala last month, my friend Rebecca works at his investment firm. She said he specifically requested background information on anyone connected to Pemberton Pharmaceuticals. Jessica's eyes sparkled with mischief. That's your family company, right? I nodded, my mind racing. In my first life, I had inherited the company after Emma's death, only to discover that Daniel had already begun embezzling funds through his law firm's estate management. By the time I realised what was happening, they had destroyed everything my father built. What kind of background information? Business operations, financial health, leadership structure? Jessica paused dramatically. And personal details about the heiresses. The pieces clicked into place. Alexander Knight wasn't just some random billionaire. He was a predator circling wounded prey. But this time, the prey had teeth. Jessica, I need you to set up a meeting with him. Tonight, if possible. Tonight? Jessica nearly choked on her latte. Olivia, you can't just demand an audience with Alexander Knight. People wait months for... Tell him Olivia Pemberton wants to discuss a business partnership, and that I have information about a pharmaceutical company acquisition that might interest him. Jessica stared at me like I'd grown a second head. What's gotten into you? Yesterday you were planning wedding venues with Daniel, and now you're talking about business acquisitions with billionaires? I smiled, thinking about the blocked calls still lighting up my phone from both Emma and Daniel. Let's just say I've had a change of perspective about my priorities. 2 hours later, I stood in the marble lobby of Knight Industries. My reflection multiplied in the polished surfaces around me. The building stretched 40 stories into the Seattle sky, each floor representing millions in revenue from Alexander's various business ventures. Miss Pemberton? A woman in an immaculate black suit approached. I'm Victoria, Mr. Knight's executive assistant. He's waiting for you in the penthouse. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt both eternal and instantaneous. When the doors opened, I stepped into an office that looked more like a luxurious apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while expensive art adorned the walls between built-in bookshelves. You're earlier than I expected. I turned toward the voice and felt my breath catch. Alexander Knight stood behind a massive mahogany desk, his dark hair perfectly styled, his steel grey suit tailored to emphasize his powerful frame. But it was his eyes that held me, intelligent, calculating, and completely focused on me. I don't like to waste time, I said, walking toward his desk with more confidence than I felt. Neither do I. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Please, sit. Can I offer you anything? Wine? Champagne? Perhaps something stronger? Just answers. I settled into the chair, crossing my legs and noting how his eyes followed the movement. I understand you've been investigating my family's company. A ghost of a smile played at his lips. Direct. I appreciate that in a business partner. Is that what we are? Partners? That depends entirely on what you're offering, Miss Pemberton. He leaned back in his chair, studying me like a chess player, analysing his opponent's strategy. When you requested this meeting, you mentioned information about an acquisition. I'm listening. I took a breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine everything. Someone is systematically destroying Pemberton Pharmaceuticals from the inside. They're embezzling funds, manipulating medical research data, and preparing to stage a hostile takeover disguised as inheritance proceedings. Alexander's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? I have something better. I have intimate knowledge of their entire plan. I leaned forward. The question is, are you interested in stopping them, or are you planning to profit from the company's destruction? Why would you think I want to profit from your company's downfall? Because you're a businessman, Mr. Knight, and dying companies make attractive acquisition targets for investors with enough capital to absorb the losses. I met his gaze steadily. But I'm offering you something more valuable than a damaged company. Which is a partnership with someone who knows every secret, every weakness, every hidden asset that Pemberton Pharmaceuticals possesses. Someone who can help you acquire not just a company, but an empire. I paused. And someone who has very personal reasons to ensure that the people currently destroying it pay for their crimes. Alexander stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, casting shadows across his profile. You're talking about revenge. I'm talking about justice and profit. The two aren't mutually exclusive. He turned back to me, and I saw something new in his expression. Respect. Tell me about these people who are destroying your company. For the next hour, I laid out everything. Emma's fake illness, designed to generate sympathy while positioning her as the heir. Daniel's role as the legal executor, funneling money through shell companies his law firm had created. Their plan to eliminate me, though I kept the details of my actual death vague, describing it instead as an attempt they would make once the inheritance was secured. Alexander listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me with newfound intensity. You're asking me to believe that your sister is faking terminal cancer to steal your inheritance, and your fiancé is complicit in embezzlement and attempted murder. Former fiancé, I corrected. As of today? His smile was sharp. I wondered about the timing of this meeting. I won't be anyone's victim, Mr. Knight. Not anymore. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and masculine that made my pulse quicken despite myself. What exactly are you proposing? A merger. Knight Industries acquires Pemberton Pharmaceuticals through a marriage contract. You get a profitable company with established research divisions and FDA approvals. I get protection from people who want me dead, and the resources to ensure they face consequences for their actions. A marriage contract. He said the words slowly as if tasting them. You're suggesting we get married for business purposes. People have married for less strategic reasons. And what makes you think I'm interested in marriage, Miss Pemberton? I could simply buy your company outright. I stood, matching his proximity with my own boldness. Because buying a company in crisis involves risk and complications. Marrying its heiress ensures legitimacy, eliminates legal challenges, and provides you with someone who knows exactly where all the bodies are buried. I smiled. Figuratively speaking, of course. Of course. His eyes danced with amusement. And what do you get out of this arrangement, besides protection? Revenge served ice cold, with a side of poetic justice. Emma wanted to steal my fiancé to gain access to wealth and power. Let her have him. I'll marry someone infinitely more powerful and watch as her pathetic schemes crumble around her. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying my face as if trying to read the secrets written there. Finally, he extended his hand. Miss Pemberton, I believe you have yourself a deal. As our hands touched, I felt electricity shoot through my veins. This was nothing like the lukewarm affection I'd felt for Daniel. This was fire and steel and dangerous possibilities. When? I asked. Soon, very soon. His grip tightened slightly. Emma and Daniel have no idea what's coming for them, do they? None whatsoever. Good. Alexander's smile was predatory. I do so enjoy surprising my opponents. My phone buzzed with yet another call from Daniel. I glanced at the screen and smiled. They're about to be very surprised indeed. The news broke exactly 72 hours later. I was sipping morning coffee in my penthouse apartment when Jessica burst through the door, waving her tablet like a weapon. Olivia, have you seen the headlines? Pharmaceutical heiress Olivia Pemberton announces engagement to billionaire Alexander Knight. The internet is going absolutely insane. I smiled serenely, setting down my cup. Is it? I hadn't noticed. Hadn't noticed? Jessica collapsed onto my couch. Your phone has been buzzing non-stop for the past hour. Emma's called 17 times, Daniel's left 12 voicemails, and apparently 3 different gossip magazines want exclusive interviews. How unfortunate. I seem to have developed selective hearing. My phone rang again. Emma's contact photo, her fake innocent smile from Christmas last year, filled the screen. I declined the call and watched it immediately ring again. Answer it, Jessica said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. I want to hear this. On the 4th ring, I finally picked up. Emma. How lovely to hear from you. Olivia. Emma's voice was shrill enough to shatter glass. What the hell is going on? The news is saying you're engaged to Alexander Knight? That's impossible. You were engaged to Daniel 3 days ago. Was I? That seems like a lifetime ago. I examined my nails, noting the massive diamond engagement ring that had appeared on my finger yesterday evening. Alexander's choice, a flawless 5-carat solitaire that probably cost more than Daniel made in 5 years. Don't play games with me. Daniel is devastated. He's been trying to reach you since I discovered your little performance at the hospital was exactly that. A performance. Silence stretched between us. When Emma spoke again, her voice had lost its hysterical edge, becoming cold and calculating. I don't know what you think you know, but I know that your medical records show no trace of cancer, Emma. I know that Daniel's law firm has been creating shell companies to funnel money from father's estate. And I know that you two planned to eliminate me once the inheritance was secured. I paused, letting the words sink in. The question is, what are you going to do now that your plan has completely fallen apart? You're insane. Daniel would never what? Fall in love with a wealthy heiress to gain access to her fortune, manipulate a woman's guilt about her dying sister, commit embezzlement through legal loopholes? I laughed. Emma, darling, that's literally his entire career strategy. Another pause. When Emma spoke again, I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. Even if some of that were true, you can't just marry a stranger. You don't know anything about this Alexander Knight. I know he's worth approximately $12 billion. I know he owns properties on 4 continents. I know his business practices are completely legitimate, unlike Daniel's. I stood and walked to my window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. And I know he'll never try to murder me for an inheritance. Murder you, Olivia, what are you talking about? But I had already hung up. Jessica stared at me with wide eyes. Murder? Olivia, what exactly happened in your first... She caught herself. I mean, what made you realise they were planning something so extreme? I had been careful about how much I revealed about my rebirth, describing my knowledge as intuition and investigation, rather than lived experience. But Jessica was too smart not to notice inconsistencies. Let's just say I have reliable information about their future plans, I said carefully, plans that will never come to fruition now. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Dinner tonight? I have updates on our mutual problem. I typed back, absolutely. Your place or mine? Mine. We have wedding arrangements to finalise. Wedding arrangements! The words sent an unexpected thrill through me. In my first life, planning my wedding to Daniel had felt like checking items off a tedious to-do list. But the thought of marrying Alexander, even for strategic reasons, made my pulse quicken. So, when exactly is this wedding happening? Jessica asked, reading over my shoulder. Soon. Alexander doesn't believe in long engagements. Olivia. Jessica's voice turned serious. I know you're angry about Emma and Daniel's betrayal, but are you sure about this? Marrying someone for revenge seems what? Calculated, strategic, smart. I turned to face her. Jessica, I spent 3 years of my life devoted to a man who was planning to destroy everything I cared about. I won't make that mistake again. But do you love him? Alexander, I mean? The question caught me off guard. Love. In my first life, I thought I loved Daniel, his easy charm, his passionate declarations, his promises of forever. But those feelings had been built on lies. What I felt for Alexander was different. Respect, attraction, a sense of intellectual equality that I'd never experienced before. Whether that would grow into love remained to be seen. I respect him, I said finally, and he respects me. That's more than I can say for my previous relationship. That evening, I arrived at Alexander's penthouse to find him standing in his kitchen, sleeves rolled up, stirring something that smelled incredible. "You cook?" I asked, surprised. "I have many hidden talents." He looked up from the stove, his eyes appreciative as they took in my black dress. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." I accepted the glass of wine he offered. "So, what updates did you want to discuss?" "Daniel's law firm received a very interesting audit notice today. Seems someone tipped off the IRS about irregularities in their estate management practices." I smiled. "How terrible for them." "Indeed. They'll be so busy dealing with federal investigators, they won't have time to interfere with our plans." Alexander plated the pasta with professional efficiency. "Speaking of which, I have taken the liberty of arranging our wedding for this Saturday." "This Saturday?" I nearly choked on my wine. "That's 4 days away." "Is that a problem? I assumed you'd want to move quickly before Emma and Daniel can mount any legal challenges to your inheritance rights." He was right, of course. In my first life, they had spent months building their case, gathering documentation to support Emma's claim as the rightful heir due to her terminal illness. The faster we moved, the less time they'd have to adapt. "No problem at all, but won't people think it's strange? Such a rushed wedding." Alexander's smile was wicked. "Let them think what they want. By the time anyone realizes what happened, it will be too late to stop us." We ate dinner on his balcony, the city lights twinkling below us like fallen stars. The conversation flowed effortlessly between business strategy and personal revelations. I learned that Alexander had built his fortune from nothing, that he valued loyalty above all else, and that he had a particular hatred for people who preyed on family bonds. "My own brother tried to steal my first company," he admitted over dessert. "I know what betrayal feels like, Olivia. That's why I understand your anger." "What happened to him? Your brother?" "He's currently managing a small accounting firm in Nebraska. I made sure he'd never be in a position to harm anyone again, but I didn't destroy him completely." Alexander's eyes met mine. "I believe in proportional justice." "And what kind of justice do Emma and Daniel deserve?" "That depends on how far they're willing to go to stop us." As if summoned by his words, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Answer it," Alexander said quietly. "Let's see how desperate they've become." I put the call on speaker. "Olivia, thank God you finally answered." Daniel's voice was strained. "We need to talk. This whole thing with Alexander Knight, it's a mistake. He's using you." "Using me for what, Daniel?" "For your company. He's a corporate raider. He seduces women, marries them, and then destroys their businesses from the inside. It's his pattern." I looked at Alexander, who was grinning broadly. "That's an interesting theory, Daniel. Did you research this yourself, or did Emma help with the investigation?" "This isn't a joke. Olivia, I know you're hurt about Emma and me, but..." "Hurt?" I laughed. "Daniel, I'm grateful. You showed me exactly who you really are before I made the mistake of actually marrying you." "Olivia, please, just meet with me. One conversation. I can explain everything." "No need. I understand everything perfectly." I looked at Alexander, who nodded encouragingly. "But I'll make you a deal. Since you're so concerned about my well-being, why don't you and Emma come to my wedding this Saturday? I'd love for you to meet my new husband." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Your wedding?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. 4 o'clock at the Cathedral of St. James. Reception to follow at the Four Seasons. It's going to be absolutely magical." I hung up before he could respond. Alexander raised his wine glass in a toast. "To Saturday, Mrs. Knight." "To Saturday," I agreed, clinking my glass against his, "and to giving Emma and Daniel the performance of a lifetime." The war was about to begin. Saturday arrived wrapped in golden sunlight and the promise of absolute victory. I stood before the full-length mirror in the cathedral's bridal suite, adjusting the pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. The wedding dress was Alexander's choice, a stunning creation of ivory silk and French lace that probably cost more than most people's cars. But it wasn't the dress that made me glow with satisfaction. It was the knowledge that, in less than an hour, Emma and Daniel would watch their entire world crumble. "Olivia?" Jessica peeked around the door, her face flushed with excitement. "The guests are arriving and, well, you need to see this." She handed me her phone, showing a live stream of the cathedral's front steps. News vans lined the street, reporters thrust microphones at arriving guests, and photographers captured every moment of what the media had dubbed Seattle's wedding of the century. But it wasn't the media circus that caught my attention. It was Emma, climbing the cathedral steps with a fury that her fake, fragile persona couldn't hide. She wore black, appropriately funeral-like for the death of her schemes. Daniel followed behind her, his face grey with defeat. "They actually came," Jessica breathed. "I can't believe they had the audacity to—" "Of course they came. They're desperate to find some way to stop this." I handed back the phone, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from my dress. Besides, they wouldn't want to miss the show. A soft knock interrupted us. "Miss Pemberton?" Alexander's assistant, Victoria, stepped inside, her professional demeanour unable to hide her excitement. "Mr. Knight wanted you to know that the federal agents arrived on schedule. They're seated in the back, ready to make their move during the reception." Perfect. Alexander had orchestrated every detail with the precision of a master chess player. The IRS audit had revealed enough evidence of embezzlement to warrant criminal charges, and today's celebration would double as Daniel's arrest. "And the other surprise?" I asked. Victoria's smile turned predatory. "Dr. Morrison is waiting in the vestibule with Emma's complete medical records. All of them, including the ones showing her remarkable recovery from the terminal cancer that never existed." The music began, Pachelbel's canon floating through the cathedral like a promise of justice. I took one last look in the mirror, seeing not the naive woman who had died 3 months ago, but someone stronger, someone who had learned that kindness without boundaries was just another word for victimhood. "Ready?" Jessica asked, offering me the bouquet of white orchids. "I have never been more ready for anything in my life." The cathedral doors opened, and I stepped into my second chance. The aisle stretched before me like a path to redemption. 300 guests rose to their feet, but my attention focused on the front row, where Emma sat rigid with fury, Daniel beside her looking like a man facing execution. Their eyes met mine, and I saw the exact moment they realised this wasn't just a wedding. It was a public execution of their dreams. Alexander waited at the altar in a black tuxedo that emphasised every angle of his powerful frame. When our eyes met, his smile held warmth that surprised me with its genuineness. Whatever this marriage had started as, something real was growing between us. The ceremony passed in a blur of traditional vows with non-traditional meaning. When Alexander slipped the platinum wedding band onto my finger, I felt the weight of more than just jewellery. I felt the weight of protection, partnership, and the promise of a future where I would never be anyone's victim again. "You may kiss the bride." Alexander's kiss was gentle but possessive, claiming me in front of everyone who had ever doubted my strength. When we separated, his whisper was meant only for me. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Knight." The reception at the Four Seasons was a masterpiece of strategic theatre. Alexander and I moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations while positioning ourselves perfectly for the evening's finale. I watched Emma and Daniel huddled together at their table, whispering frantically as they tried to formulate some last desperate plan. They had no idea how thoroughly they had already lost. "Olivia!" Emma's voice cut through the celebration as she approached our head table. Her face was a mask of sisterly concern, but her eyes burned with hatred. "I need to speak with you, privately." "Anything you want to say to my wife, you can say in front of me," Alexander said smoothly, his arm tightening protectively around my waist. Emma's composure cracked slightly. "This is family business." "I am her family now." Alexander's tone could have frozen champagne. "You lost that privilege when you decided to destroy her life for money." "I don't know what lies she's told you, but Emma is sick," Daniel interrupted, stepping up beside Emma with renewed desperation. "She needs medical treatment, not accusations." "Medical treatment?" I tilted my head innocently. "For what condition exactly?" Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Emma grabbed his arm, her grip white-knuckled. "The cancer, obviously," Emma said through gritted teeth. "The terminal diagnosis that doesn't exist." Dr. Morrison's voice carried across the reception as he approached our table, a thick folder in his hands. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't let this charade continue any longer." Emma's face went sheet white. "Dr. Morrison, what are you doing here?" "Telling the truth." The elderly physician opened the folder, revealing pages of medical documents. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Emma Pemberton's doctor for 3 years. She has never had cancer. She has never had any terminal illness. Every test, every scan, every blood panel has been completely normal." The reception hall fell silent except for the clink of champagne glasses being set down in shock. That's impossible," Daniel stammered. "Emma showed me the diagnosis reports, the treatment plans." "Forgeries," Dr. Morrison said sadly. "Very expensive forgeries, which raises interesting questions about where she obtained the funds to commission them." Emma's mask finally shattered completely. "You don't understand. Olivia has everything. The company, the inheritance, the perfect life. I deserved something too." "So you decided to steal it?" Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. "By faking a terminal illness, manipulating your sister's guilt, and enlisting her fiancé to embezzle from your father's estate." "We weren't stealing," Daniel shouted, drawing stares from the entire reception. "We were redistributing assets more fairly. Olivia never appreciated what she had." "Unlike you, who appreciated it enough to plan my murder once the theft was complete?" The words hung in the air like a bomb. Emma's face went from white to grey. "Murder?" someone whispered. "Did she say murder?" "The plan was quite elaborate," I continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Stage my death as an accident once Emma inherited everything. Daniel would manage the estate as her widowed husband, and they'd live happily ever after on my family's fortune." Emma lunged forward, her composure completely gone. "You self-righteous witch. You think you're so perfect, so deserving. Well, you're not. You never were." She raised her hand to strike me, but Alexander caught her wrist effortlessly. "I wouldn't," he said, his voice carrying enough menace to make grown men step back. "Touch my wife, and you'll discover just how protective I can be." "Federal agents," Victoria announced loudly. "You're under arrest." Chaos erupted as FBI agents moved through the crowd. Daniel tried to run but was tackled before he reached the exit. Emma screamed threats and accusations as handcuffs clicked around her wrists, her mask of innocence finally destroyed beyond repair. "This isn't over," she shrieked as they dragged her away. "I'll destroy you both. The reception hall doors closed behind them, cutting off her threats. Silence fell over the stunned guests before conversation exploded like a dam bursting. Alexander and I stood together, watching our enemies disappear into custody. His hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Any regrets, Mrs. Knight?" I thought about my first life, the betrayal, the pain, the lonely death in a hospital room while Emma and Daniel celebrated my demise. Then I looked around at our wedding reception, at the life I had built from the ashes of that tragedy. Only one, I said, smiling up at him. I regret that it took me dying once to learn how to truly live. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of our Malibu beach house, watching Alexander emerge from the ocean like some sort of mythical sea god. Pemberton Pharmaceuticals was thriving under Knight Industries management. Our marriage had evolved from strategic alliance to genuine love affair, and Emma and Daniel were serving concurrent sentences in federal prison. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former pharmaceutical heiress Emma Pemberton denied parole. Cellmate reports she spends hours crying about wasted opportunities and the sister who got away. I deleted the notification without reading the rest. Emma and Daniel were my past. Alexander, our growing company, and the family we were planning were my future. "What are you smiling about?" Alexander asked, wrapping wet arms around me from behind. "Justice," I said, leaning into his warmth. "Sweet, perfect justice." As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of triumph, I knew that my second life had exceeded every dream I dared to dream. Sometimes the best revenge truly was living well.